Thank you everybody for joining us. Now I'm just going to hand over to Greg Piley from Stroud Brewery, who's just going to share some of the slides with regards to the story of Stroud Organic Brewery. Over to you, Greg.
Hi, Nikki, and hi, everybody. Yeah, thanks for inviting me. My story, or the story of the brewery, is a little bit about myself. I didn't start out as a brewer, so it's just a bit about what motivated me to set up the brewery and brought us to this point. And if I could just share my screen. There we go. Hopefully you can all see that. So this first slide, it says Buen Vivir, which is actually Spanish and translates sort of best to live well. And by that, I don't mean to live opulently and overly spend, but actually it's about living well with yourself and with your community and the environment. And it's actually a concept that's really sort of come from South America, where the sort of knowledge and values that indigenous people have and their sort of knowledge and connection to their natural environment has that really made it into local policy as well, and it's well known as a term there. And we've really taken that to heart in the values at Stroud Brewery. So the next few slides are really all about why we came to that. Stroud's an unusual place and actually has been quite a hotbed for innovation, art, and alternative thinking for many years. And our story, and trying to put Stroud on the map, is very much part of our business and our brand. So here I'm just trying to illustrate my journey. So I didn't start out as a brewer. I actually studied ecology at university. I went to Swansea and chose some marine modules and ended up graduating as a marine biologist, but actually ended up being fairly terrestrial after that and working in UK conservation, initially doing chalk grassland surveys in the Downs in Wiltshire and around Oxfordshire. Then I went off to be a VSO in the north of Nigeria, and that was supporting conservation in the northern savannah. There was a national park called Yankari with a population of elephants, and it was also a really important migration point, first stop for birds traveling over the Sahara Desert. And in protecting that place, at that time, conservationists recognized that they couldn't just be a police force keeping local people out. You actually had to involve local people with the management of these places and give back some rewards. So my task at the time took me to meet local people, and that was usually on market days in the surrounding villages and meeting in the local bar. And we weren't drinking the beers that you and I used to. It was beers made out of guinea corn and sorghum and maize, sort of fairly thick, fairly sour brews. And I left Nigeria and came home, and family didn't really sort of appreciate my life-changing experience. And people sort of saw Africa largely as a single country and not really the diversity that it had. So I managed to persuade Guinness of a project to illustrate the diversity of life of Africa through the window of traditional alcoholic drinks. And I spent the next 4 years traveling around looking at the drinks, how they reflected their geography and geology for the plants that they grew, how they were turned into different drinks, and the social settings that they were drunk in. When I came back to the UK, I wanted to carry on work that still connected people with place and the management of their landscape. And I ended up working at the Soil Association in their local food team. And I actually started there because I was interested in setting up my own vegetable box scheme. And they didn't have any guidance. So I visited the then handful of veggie box schemes and wrote their technical guide on how to set up a vegetable box scheme. Before then, managing a project looking at a concept known as community-supported agriculture, which is looking at the different arrangements where local people support local farms in transitioning towards local food production. And they were financial arrangements and labor arrangements, but different things to give security to local farms. And that's actually what brought me to Stroud. There was a group of people really keen to support a local farm and ended up setting up a vegetable box or a vegetable scheme here. And it was whilst weeding on a volunteer day with a fellow beer enthusiast that we said, wouldn't it be great if Stroud had a brewery? And I was possessed from that moment. And several years later, established Stroud Brewery with our first brew in 2006. And having a sort of background in ecology and an interest in sort of a global context, I wanted to put those values right at the heart of our business. And the first thing that we did was to try and source local ingredients. And we were fortunate that we have one of only, it says 3, but actually one shut down. It's not 3 anymore. It's only 2 traditional floor maltings in the UK. Warminster is based in Warminster in Wiltshire. It's a traditional floor maltings in that the grains are actually they're soaked and then laid on the maltings floors to sprout. And the sprouting grain is actually what produces the sweet malt extract out of the starch. Commercial maltings now sort of rely on continuous systems with rotating barrels and things, but this is a traditional system, and it produces quite a sort of variable but complex malt. So it's a real craft process in itself. And we're fortunate the guy that owns it is a grain merchant in his own right. That means he works with farmers to contract and grow grain, and if it meets the right quality, he will give them sort of agreed prices. And the best of it goes into their maltings. And because he controls supply chain from the farm to the maltings to the brewers, he can guarantee the provenance of that grain. And we have an agreement that all our malt comes from the Cotswolds, or at least 15 miles radius of our brewery. And I was fortunate to identify Warminster Maltings. They're based in Warminster in Wiltshire. And it's owned by a grain merchant, and his principal job is to work with farmers, guarantee the prices if they meet the quality, and the best of the barley he puts through his craft maltings and supplies little breweries all over the UK and indeed all over the world. Actually, it's one of only 2 traditional craft maltings left in the UK, and by traditional maltings there's a whole story about what malting is, but basically you sprout barley. And it's sprouted on the floor and hand managed. So they turn it the same way that you turn your bean sprouts in a jar by shaking them. You can see the picture here. There's a guy dragging a rake through the malted barley grains. Because he controls that supply chain, we have an agreement that all the barley that we use, or most of it, comes from the Cotswolds, about 15 miles radius of the brewery. So that was our first sort of commitment. In 2008, when we saw the sort of first of our 2 recent recessions, that's when I decided I thought I couldn't rely just on selling to pubs. Pubs were starting to close down. We got in a panic, so we looked at how else we could sell our beer. And that's when I started selling direct to the public and started bottling our beers. And in bottling, I decided that all our beers would be organic in the bottle. So our beers to pubs were still not organic, but the bottled and packaged beers were. And the main reason for that was that we could charge the premiums we needed to for bottles, whereas the prices to pubs and landlords were very fixed on formulas based on alcohol, ABV. And that was a sort of traditional, long-term standing thing, which actually in recent years, sort of with the craft beer movement, we've moved away very much from those ABV price lists, because they recognize there's other values and not all beers are equal. So we've decoupled from that, and it's quite different now. I should have brought this up earlier when I was talking about it. So this is actually a field walk just a couple of years ago. Robin Appel, he's the owner of the maltings. David Wilson was the farm manager of Dutchy Farm near Tetbury. Actually, HRH has now moved residence, and David had to move too, and is now farming at Fir Farm near Guyting Power, another large organic farm. And the field that we're walking in is actually a heritage variety. It's the grandparent to Maris Otter, which is a very well-known brewing barley. And actually, Plumage Archer is interesting. It's the first commercially purebred barley. So before Plumage Archer, all barleys were a landrace. They were a mix of varieties. and they actually behaved quite differently in different locations. So plumage archer was the first sort of commercially pure barley grain, and it's been grown as a crop down in Tetbury. So as well as sort of local sourcing our malt and organic production, we try to bring other good practices into our business, and this slide is sort of showing some of that. So as we opened up our bar, we wanted to also champion other local suppliers, local producers. So in our bar now, pretty much all our drinks, the wines, soft drinks, and these are all organic or very local. Our sodas aren't. We use a company that uses UK sugar beet for syrups. We're a living wage employer, which is quite difficult in hospitality. The margins are quite tight, and generally hospitality pays sort of the minimum wage. But we pay the living wage for all our employees. In terms of finance, we've had several stages of growth, including the startup. And each time I've done a crowdfunder. Initially, it was very informal. It was friends lending me money, and I wrote an agreement with them. Then we moved into a new building, and those friends continued to lend me money, and I approached the sort of growing network and did a slightly more formal agreement and paid interest on their payments. And then more recently, we moved into our existing building, and we raised 300,000 through a community bond that was administered through Triodos Bank. And we did it through the bank because the financial borrowing and lending rules have changed, become a lot stricter. So we had to do a formal offer, and Triodos Bank did that for us. And the thing that we really got out of that was, one, they gave it some rigor as a bank, but also we're really pleased that they endorsed us as an ethical business and were willing to put us on their platform. And our offer was shared through ethical finances right through the UK. So that was a really great exercise. We now source 100% renewable energy through Ecotricity, another local Stroud company, who also can provide us with gas. So they supply gas to the grid that's produced through anaerobic fermentation and other means. So we use green. Well, we don't use the green gas, but we source it through Ecotricity, who supply green gas to the grid. We managed to harvest rainwater off our roof, and we flush our toilets. I think we get pretty much all the water that we use in our toilets is harvested off the roof. We've got a 14,000 litre rainwater tank. And then when we look at the events and things that we do at the brewery, we provide a lot of support to local community events, the parish council, and often offer our space for nothing to those activities. So we're doing all these different things. I think that slide should have come a bit later. I already mentioned organic, and why am I committed to organic? I think before the term regenerative agriculture, which is something we're hearing more and more now, we've sort of felt that organic farming provides the basis for responsible farming, in that they're not using excess soluble fertilizers, which become or can become one of the highest costs to water authorities to clean up out of waterways. There's no indiscriminate use of sort of things like antibiotics in animals. It's got the highest standard of animal welfare. And one of the claims, the sort of strongest claims for organic farming, is just the increased biodiversity on farms. And it's quite obvious that they have increased biodiversity in the field because they're not spraying insecticide or herbicides, but actually it's more because organic farming practice, in order to have natural predators and things like that, to have a natural system that's self-regulating, it just has more complexity on the farm, and so we do see more biodiversity value. So I think biodiversity and animal welfare are the driving reasons why we supported organic farming. Next slide is just sort of illustrating that there is a rise and an increase in regenerative farming, and it still amazes me that there seems to be a bit of still polarization between the organic community and the not organic community, and regenerative is almost used as an opportunity to pursue sustainable farming without being organic. We're trying to position ourselves and say, well, this is great that people are looking at improving farming practice, being more sustainable, and actually organic is just part of the toolkit. of the continuum of good practice that you might adopt. And it's great that conventional farmers are looking at all these different things. And there's some really fantastic innovation that we're seeing across agriculture. So I think we just have to embrace all the opportunities we can to improve farming practice. In doing all these good things, we felt the organic certification was only just a subset, a little part of what we're doing, but we didn't really have a way of measuring or even sharing the wider practice and the good things that we were doing. So we decided to become a B Corp and become accredited as a B Corp. And if you haven't heard of B Corp, it is a fairly new accreditation that's come out of the States. And it is for for-profit businesses. So it's not for charities or not for profits. So it's for-profit businesses that are looking to do their best in terms of social, environmental good practice. And it's a measure of that good practice. And I would encourage anybody to go to the B Corp website and sign on to their impact report, which is the tool to measure your performance. And it's absolutely free to do that. And essentially, the impact report is a multi-choice questionnaire. And the choices are sort of good practice to best practice. And as you get on there, you see there's a bit of work to even get on to good practice. But what it gives is a toolkit to enable continuous improvement of your business, that you can always see what the next step is to improve your business practice. And it's been quite inspiring to investigate and really interrogate our own business and see how much better we can really do. When I went on the platform, you have to score, you can score a maximum of 200 points. You need to score a minimum of 80 to become a B Corp. The average score of everybody on the platform at the time was 50, and that's the UK average for business is something like 50. And we managed to get our accreditation with just a bit more than 84.7, I think our initial score was. We're just actually going through accreditation again now. The scoring's changed a bit, but it looks like we have done some improvement, and that's things like being able to source electricity, power, and a few other things that we've done to improve. In that move, we actually got kicked out of a previous premises, which created an opportunity in that we've now built and moved into a very fancy, nice new building next to the canal in Stroud, with much more room, a lot more facility. But the overhead has also necessitated that we actually grow our business. So in looking at a brand, we wanted to see how we could make ourselves more relevant beyond our immediate community, beyond our local pubs, and especially for our packaged products. The organic message, say, wasn't really doing the whole story for us. We felt B Corp was, but in all of that, we wanted to rebrand our package and look at something that was, I'd say, a little bit more relevant. Now, if I just go, let's see it. If I just go back a couple of slides, there, actually, no, that's the new brand. We were in bottles with, here we are. You can still see my picture down there. Where are we? There. That was our old bottle and logo. Then we rebranded, and you can see an image there of the new logo on bottles. During the pandemic, one of the things that every brewery in the land wanted to do was to start packaging beer. So the packaging companies became quite inundated, and actually the quality of service also declined. So our lead times went from 2 to 3 weeks to 2 to 3 months, at a time where we could just not predict our sales. You know, how could you predict sales in just going into a new pandemic? And also for a line, you know, packaged products that we hadn't really sold on that quantity before. So forecasting sales was really difficult. So one of the decisions we made, which is probably the best business decision we've ever made, really, was installing our own canning machine. So we have a canning machine in the brewery, which means the beer goes straight from the tank into the can. And in that move, we decided to maximize the use of that machine and put all our products into can, and we canned bottles. That's also had masses of environmental savings as well. So here we are. So our new design is in can. And I can hold some of those out. You can see it on the image. There's our budding can. Where is the camera? There we go. So yes, everything went to cans. And we've saved, one of the biggest things that we saved on the losses of liquid as we sent to the packages. So every time you move beer from a tank to another tank, there'll be beer in the pipe. And when it goes to bottling, they might filter it. And in order to filter, the filter housings need to be flooded. And again, that's beer that's lost. So we were losing about 10% of the beer we were sending, which is about 500 or 600 cans every brew that we were saving. So just the savings on losses are a financial saving, but of course a huge environmental saving, because that was, that was beer that, barley was grown, transported, beer transported, and then thrown down the drain. So massive environmental saving. And in the rebrand, we're also trying to tell some of the complex messages that we find in the sustainability story. There's just so many different things that we need to try and convey. And on this slide here, we've got our best-selling beer, Budding. That's named after the guy who invented the lawnmower, who happens to be from Stroud. He was an engineer that worked on the wool mills here, and he took the kit that took the rough nap off the cloth and sliced that off to give you a nice smooth cloth. And he mounted it on wheels and invented the lawnmower. More critically to us, that was that the factory that manufactured those lawnmowers is on the site we are now. So we sit on ground zero for lawnmowers all over the world. And so that we named the beer after him. But in the rebrand, we took that story of a guy who single-handedly sort of had an out-of-box moment and then revolutionized lawn sports and the cutting of grass globally. And so we sort of use that as an opportunity to say, well, actually, you can have a global view, but very small local action can have massive impact. And we picked several of these stories, and they go on the back of all our packs in some way. So this is some of the branding. Of course, one of our core messages is about drinking responsibly farmed beer, and we continue to investigate, the role of organic in regenerative agriculture. As well as measuring our overall performance, one of the things that we're doing is measuring our carbon impact. So we've been doing a carbon footprint each year. This year, we're actually going to verify our carbon footprint. And it's a bit complicated for us because we have our production, our production facility and brewing beer, but we also have a bar. So in effect, we have two businesses, a hospitality business and a production business. So I have to sort of tease them apart. But ultimately, as an entire business, we have a carbon liability. And we'll be looking at that and saying, well, how can we further reduce? We've already done a big step by taking 100% green power. What other things can we do to reduce? So heat recovery within our system and use that to heat up water for process. Other things that we might do, moving to cans has had a big impact on this carbon footprint. We probably save about 15% of carbon by changing that packaging. So there's things that we can do in the brewery. We're also looking at our suppliers. Again, we will favor suppliers that can demonstrate that they're doing good things and reducing their carbon impact. And then what's left, we need to either offset, and that means paying for a carbon credit. So to try and capture carbon in some way. Some businesses do it by funding tree planting. There's marine projects looking at seagrasses. There's projects looking at peat restoration and maintaining peat. We've been working with our hop farmers, and again, and actually some local salad producers, so local farmers, to sort of look at how we might work with them to change the practice and increase the carbon soil. But quite excitingly as well is looking at working with other local businesses and saying, what happens if we brought together our collective budgets, our carbon liability budgets, and can we invest in bigger projects locally, looking at rewilding or even community energy and power. And I think the idea, even though that might not directly offset our carbon liability, it still has an impact. And looking at community energy would be a really exciting thing for us to do. This is always the end, and ultimately we're a brewery, And despite all the good things we do, the bottom line is that we've got to produce great beer. And I'm quite proud that we've consistently produced great beer and organic beers. We just submitted our keg beers to the regional Society of Independent Brewers competition. We put in 4 beers and we managed to get 3 awards back. We got a gold for our IPA, so it was voted the best IPA in all of England and Wales, voted by brewers themselves. We got a silver for our lager and a bronze for our Big Cat Stout, all in the sort of keg category. So being an organic producer faced with the restrictions and the reduced sort of palette that we have of hops and things like that, to get those awards in amongst probably several hundred breweries across the region was, really great for us and our brewers. And then finally, yes, just this coming back to this concept of doing our best to try and live well and do the best for our stakeholders. And again, B Corp, instead of talking about shareholders, it is about our stakeholders, and that could be our own team, our staff, it's our directors, it's our local community, but it's also our suppliers and our customers, and really trying to build trade on the basis of relationships rather than just the cash and the money. So it is about locality, and it is about openness and transparency and our businesses. And this can here is actually on the back of our Big Cat Stout. And when I was traveling around Ethiopia, we came across a group of people who define their community, directly translated, is those that share the same beer. And they were hunter-gatherers, and they sort of settle in these disparate communities, and somebody will brew a beer on that day, and it's really a case of how far you're willing to walk to the next hut to go and find that beer, and that determines the radius of your community. And I really love that. And of course, we all have that to some extent. We have our pubs and places that we walk to and meet our friends, and those places do determine our community. So I think there's a real role for business like ours, and hospitality in particular, to create those centres of community. And again, that's something that we really want to work with and see how we can redefine those hospitality places and build more community. And that is actually my concluding slide. There we go. How are we doing for time?
Yeah, that's fine. That's great. Thank you, Greg.
Okay.
I can just see that you've got your hand up there, Bernadette. Thank you.
I have. I thought I'd kick it off. Firstly, I'm well impressed that you pay the living wage to all your colleagues. Everybody knows I'm very much colleague interested in. And the other thing is, I'm even more impressed with your rainwater toilet. I mean, when I come up, I'm thinking, what is rainwater toilet? And I think it's a fantastic idea. And I think it's one that we might pinch with pride if we can start in the right direction, because we're all trying to save different things in different ways. And I think that would work in Warwick head office. I'm not saying it would work in some of our smaller shops, but it most certainly would work for the likes of head office and probably the other offices that we've got. So thank you very much, and I'm well impressed. I didn't think I'd be interested so much in real ales, because to be honest, I don't like them. Full stop, end of story.
There's a beer for everyone.
Yeah, but I'm also Irish, and I don't like Irish whiskey or Guinness, so don't get offended. But my husband he does occasionally drink the real ale, and I'm going to push him in that way in the next future. So thank you very much. I thought it was really interesting conversation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Bernadette. And it's really interesting point that it's, you obviously you highlighted there about the living wage, and that's something that obviously Greg is extremely proud of, especially as you've highlighted, Greg, that in the hospitality industry it is very unusual, and that's something that I just kind of wanted to share, because every time that I have engaged with Greg or get one of our organic suppliers, it's the fact that the most important and insignificant impact impact you make is the choice of the raw materials. And of course, they must be uncompromising about those ingredients. And of course, they come at a cost, and pay a premium price for the ingredients. So therefore, the actual profit and margin that a business like Stroud is making is actually, is squeezed smaller. So to be making to be paying the living wage is really it just goes to show that you really are living those values, isn't it?
You're absolutely right, Nikki, and it's good to point out. I mean, we are paying the living wage. Organic malt, we're paying about 30 to 40% more for that raw material than a conventional brewery who could get it from East Anglia, or indeed a lot of breweries were importing from Eastern Europe and probably Ukraine, who produce a huge amount of malting barley at a fraction of the cost. Organic hops, again, we're probably looking at 25 to even 50% of those costs. Now, the material costs aren't the entire cost, but they do make a big, significant difference. And of course, depending, yes, the sort of more that you go towards wholesale, of course, those differences make a bigger difference. The margins are so slim. And in selling our products, we're really careful that we don't want to try and premiumize it for the sake of premium sake. It's not about that. It's just purely getting the margin and the true cost of that product. And I think people don't realize it. And in the past, organic might have taken the opportunity to over premiumize it, but we really don't do that at all. We actually operate on thinner margins than our competitors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Before we open the floor to some questions, and I know we've had some questions that have been sent in as well in advance of tonight's event, was just again with regards to UK grown hops. I mean, I've learned a lot since I've met you, and as you know, and some of you all might know, my husband's in the brewing industry as well, and I've learned over the years that obviously UK grown organic hops, it's very difficult to get hold of. And I know that, Greg, obviously you collaborate with a number of suppliers, and actually with River Cottage with Hugh Winley. And I just wondered if you would share, why you've done that, and where possibly in the future you think that could lead to.
Yeah. So as an organic brewery, the most restrictive ingredient is the availability of organic hops and the variety of organic hops. And we get hops from all over the world. New Zealand's a big organic hop grower. The States is quite big. Central Europe still produces organic hops, but we probably get 30 to 40% of the hops that we use from the UK, largely for bittering. But the supply has been a bit inconsistent, and certainly the amount of cultivation, has reduced. So we actually went to our hop supplier, Charles Farm, to see how we could maintain or improve the supply. And we were quite surprised to find out there's actually only 2 organic hop growing farms in the UK. And we were one of their principal customers. And on sort of getting to understand a bit more, actually hops and hop growing in the UK is completely on the decline, conventional and organic. And that's largely down to climate change. So the weather in the UK is becoming warmer and more humid, and we're having wetter summers. And hops really hate warm, damp weather. They're very susceptible to fungal diseases, apart from a few other things. And so the warm, damp weather is actually putting pressure on those farmers. Hop farming is unlike other farming. The kit that you need to plant, tie up, harvest, dry those hops and preserve them is unique to the hop industry. It's not like a combine that you can use for barley and wheat and rapeseed and linseed and share it between farmers. It's unique to hop growing. So hop farmers invest in a huge amount of capital, and then they grow a crop that is very risky to grow. And so the way that they mitigate that risk is by spraying with large amounts of herbicide and insecticide, traditionally. So conventional hops are quite heavily sprayed. Interesting. Well, in recent years, there's become more and more restrictions on what interventions and chemical interventions farmers can use. And again, that's made it quite hard for UK conventional hop growing full stop. So the conventional farmers are also quite interested in looking at techniques that allows them to grow hops without these chemical interventions. And so we're quite interested in our project. And we managed to get a small amount of funding from the innovative farmers. And it's quite unusual because it is working with the supply chain. It's the farmers, it's the hop merchant, and it's us as brewers working together to look at how we can. Initially, it's the farmers, a farmer-led project, and their interest is looking at disease resistance in hops. So they're looking at new varieties that are a bit more resistant, and they can actually grow them. And then we're starting to look at different agronomic techniques for growing hops. For example, for us, we're interested in bitterness, and it doesn't need to be single varieties for bitterness. So you could potentially grow different varieties of hops in the same row, breaking up the genetic diversity or improving the genetic diversity and then making them more resistant. So to get that, you'd have to select for ripening time, because actually hops ripen over a period of about a month. And farmers will actually select different ripening times so they don't have to harvest them all on the same day. They want them to ripen successively over the month. But if you choose varieties that ripen at the same time and plant them in a row, then it will just help break up the variety. And one of the things I meant to say actually is that each hop variety is a clone. It's a cutting propagated from an individual parent plant. So if you're trying to grow Fuggles or Goldings, you're growing a genetically identical plant in the middle of a field, all alongside that, which again makes them very susceptible to disease. Hops traditionally they grow in hedgerows and not used to growing sort of forced down the middle of a field. So that's why they're a very difficult and marginal crop to grow. But we are, we're learning. Well, certainly we're learning a great deal about the hop growing industry. And I think part of the exercise as well was to try and share those difficulties with our consumers, because you think of Britain as a traditionally hop growing country, and you wouldn't be faced with those difficulties. So you mentioned River Cottage. We produced a series of 3 beers, and in each of them we've chosen to use entirely UK hops. And one of them, I've got it here. Where is it? They are Hopful. It's a bitter. A best bitter, we actually call it a better bitter, and it's really showcasing the best of those UK hops as a sort of traditional best bitter. And the beers that we've done with River Cottage, we actually started out by recreating a beer that uses nettles, a beer called Stinger. There used to be another brewery that brewed it for River Cottage and Hugh, but he was pretty keen to have an organic partner in the new arrangement. So we started producing Stinger. Then we looked at our hop project and realized that there was an issue there. And with the beers, we then added a trio to the set, which was a beer using hemp flower to celebrate the botanical 3 botanical cousins. So hemp, hops, and stinging nettles are all closely related, and so we've got a trio of beers with hop, stinging nettles, and hemp flower. Can I find the hemp? I haven't got a hemp one here, but that was the story behind the River Cottage beers and the celebration of the hop.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. So thank you. Like I said, I'm always learning. Always learning.
I'm just really happy you do lagers as well, because I'm a bit of a lager girl. I'm not a bitter or stout. So yeah, the fact that you do lagers, yeah.
Well, we started doing those because of our bar. So traditionally we were producing beers for pubs and traditional sort of cask ales. And then when we opened our own bar, of course, people wanted to try a lager. And so we thought, well, we've got to give it a go to sell on our own bar. And actually the lagers have been so good that we've got so much demand for them that actually we don't really want to grow our business on it, because it takes a lot of time in tank. For every lager brew that we do, we could have brewed 3 times as much cask beer, because they take up that tank time. And again, we don't charge that extra. You can't push the premiums. Whereas there are breweries that are dedicated to producing lager, and they've got tank farms. You see these big tank outside just to hold the lager. But no, it is a very good lager. We're quite pleased with it.
I was going to ask actually, do the different types of ales and lagers and that take different times to sort of brew up, sort of thing? So
they do. I mean, the main difference is lager and cask ales, and that's because the lager yeast actually ferments at a lower temperature for longer and slower. And actually, the term lager means to store, and it was kept in sort of cold caves to store over winter, and that was really to help the beer settle out its proteins and become clear on the continent.
okay.
It's just a different brewing technique. Yeah.
Every day's a school day.
Yeah.
No.
we don't use caves, but we chill our tanks to feel like a cave to the beer.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you.
Has anybody got any questions for Greg? Yes, Paul. Fire away.
Hello, Greg.
Hello.
My name's Paul Mather. I'm a director of Mid Counties, but prior to that, I used to run my own convenience store in a village called Shurston.
Yes.
I was a proud supplier of your beers and lager.
Oh, fantastic.
So it brings back memories. But the reason I just want to highlight that is from when we ran the shop, what we did, we had specialists in each area. I had a wine specialist, I had a vegan specialist, and since I was a beer specialist. And I was very fortunate that one of your employees used to live in our village. So I really could get an insight into your beers and how to sell it. But the point here is that whilst we may do it in our larger food markets, I think a point for mid-counties is for the employees and members to realise what the background is, because I lost count the number of times I was asked, Paul, I want to take some beers home. What do you recommend? And when you can tell a story, it sells the beer. But if it's just on a shelf, unfortunately, it could get lost.
Yeah.
So it's something internally I think we could develop more within mid-counties to have experts to really tell the story, which would then sell your product even greater.
Yes. Well, we'd love the opportunity to do that. And we've chatted with Nicola a few times, how we might do it in the co-op stores. And again, yes, really telling that sustainability story, which is so common. There's so many different things to it, whether it's organic or power or even, the social side, the living wage. All these things matter to sort of to businesses, and there's just too much to say. But if we can get the right sort of conversational style and make it accessible, yes, that'd be a great opportunity to try and do that.
Yeah,
Greg,
absolutely. And yeah, sorry, I was going to say,
Yeah.
sorry, Karen, we have spoken about that, and that's where actually this is a great way now that we can kick this off in the future, because the society has recently revisited and recreated a new strategy in particular for our food markets, and then we'll be moving on to the convenience as well. So the timing now is great for that. And in fact, so Karen, actually there's a question from Matt that he's popped in the chat, which
he said, hi Greg, you have a really really great presentation, thank you. I really like your social media presence. 9,000 followers on Instagram gives you a great platform to talk about not only product but also how you do things the right way. Is this an area you have really focused on and have seen this turn into sales growth?
Oh, it's a difficult question. I mean, we've been around for 17 years and breweries do have their following. So I think, we have grown a very strong local committed base to our social media and to our newsletter as well. I think we've got 7,000 signed up to our newsletter. We're really conscious that social media is a great way of reaching a much broader audience. And we never feel we're doing well enough with it. So even though you might think we're investing lots of time, I never think we spend enough time on it. So it's something that we're really trying to improve on and get better. The other thing is that we have two sides to our businesses. There are our cans that we want to see travel further afield, and there's our bar and venue. So getting the messaging right between our local customers who want to come to to gigs and events and eat a burger against those people who are interested in a good beer and our sort of sustainability values. So again, we're trying to get the right balance between the two. And actually, we have considered splitting our accounts, but we don't want to lose those 9,000 followers to one of those accounts. So yes, there's a lot to be considered about. And of course, there's several platforms. We have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have Instagram, and our newsletter as well. So getting the right balance between them and reaching those different audiences through those different routes. I don't know if that answers the question. I think we could be doing better, is the answer. Yeah.
I think I mean, because social media is all about engagement, and that is something that you do very, very well, isn't it? Because that's what people want, isn't it? So they want to have that, you know, that engagement, and they want to be able to see things and hear about things, and so yeah.
And we've got so many little stories to tell, so we are always looking to reinvent it to make it appropriate for that audience, and then retelling it again. So, you know, whether it's a trade customer, or, you know, a different age group or different interest group, that same story can be rewritten in lots of different ways. It's just having the time and the know-how to be able to rewrite those things. Yeah, it's a big task.
It is. Any other questions from anybody?
Right, we've only got 5 minutes left of the session, so I don't know, did you have any, you said you had a couple of questions that were sent in from people that couldn't come tonight? You got one of those?
Yes, yeah, I do. And it's with regards to it's a question really. It's more of a statement about B Corp. So obviously you've touched on that, Greg, and proud to say now we've got, you know, several of our local suppliers, you know, Hobbs House, yourselves, Tracklements, who've all gone through this very rigorous process, but also, as you highlighted, very, very rewarding. And having worked with the local supplier community for many years, you know, always believed that the problems cannot be solved by just, you know, governments and non-profit organizations, but by our communities and workers, you know, and like yourselves, isn't it, by uniting. And you know, I think there's about 800, isn't there now, B Corp businesses in the UK. And and as you mentioned, it started, didn't it, in America. I mean, as a B Corp company, what benefit, you know, are you seeing from being a B Corp, apart from obviously you know the positive impact, but you know, as a business?
Well, the main thing it does for us is well, one is it enables us to measure our performance. We don't, you know, how well are we actually doing as a responsible business? So the first thing is being able to measure it. Then the other thing that it really does is trying to help to communicate that, whether we're communicating it, you know, in detail, but the main thing is just having a trusted brand that says this business is doing something to be responsible as a business. There isn't another equivalent accreditation out there that has that holistic view of your practice and says quite concisely on the, you know, on the side of a can or whatever. So ours is there that says, you know, actually that's what it goes. So the organic symbol is probably one of the most trusted symbols. You know, it has integrity. They have a verification process. I think B Corp is doing that for business in its wider sense as well, and there's growing sort of recognition of that as a brand. It's certainly within business, it's quite well known. There's still quite a lot of work to grow consumer knowledge of the brand, the B Corp brand, but I have confidence that we're going to see far more as businesses, the number of businesses grow. And interestingly, the strength of B Corp is its business members. You know, there is very little resource at the head office. There's a small gang of them. They've got fantastic resources, but the real work is happening amongst the membership themselves and the work that they do to promote, you know, that good practice.
Sure. Thank you. And I have one last question. Now, my favorite beer is Hop Drop. I do love a tropical fruity beer. And what's your favourite?
Well, do you know what? That's really interesting. I think in a can, my favorite would also be hop drop. I like to take it away. I like that flavor hit and a sipping beer at home. If I'm sitting in the pub and I'm drinking several more pints of it, I really enjoy Budding, which is our founding beer, and it's designed to be a drinkable beer. It's not about being extreme or anything like that. It's just moreish. It's not too heavy. It's balanced, and so it's a perfect pint drinking beer.
So what you're saying is it's a dangerous beer to start
It's a
drinking.
dangerous
Really.
beer. Yes. I don't know if you like Bombay mix, but you sort of have a bit of Bombay mix, and those peanuts are nice and sweet, and then suddenly the heat sort of starts building up in your mouth, and you need another mouthful of Bombay mix to counteract it. Well, Budding is a bit like that.
Oh, look, thank you, Greg. And before we close, obviously I know Chaz and probably even Matt, actually, because we're all over like this neck of the woods, where we've had the pleasure of visiting the tap room and the new brewery, and it really is heartwarming to see all the events that you're doing, from your bar boot sale to the quizzes to the trampolining to the Pilates and the yoga classes. It really is a place where something is always happening, and a place to meet and share and grow and learn. And it's so aligned with our cooperative values, and I know everything that we kind of aspire that we would like to be. So yes, thank you very much. For giving up your time tonight, and for sharing your story so far. And we're very proud to be part of it, and I'm delighted that I can now pass the baton on to Simon Remington, that can work with you in the future, and the team at Mid Counties to grow Stroud Brewery's organic presence across our estate. So and Karen's just popped in. Is it in the chat? You've just popped. You've got a little feedback
link. But also, guys, I'll pop it in an email for you as well, just in case you don't have time to finish it tonight. It literally, there's only about 4 questions on there. It would only take 2 minutes. So it's there, but I'll also pop it in an email and send it across to you after this. So yeah, I wouldn't, I'd be really grateful if you wouldn't mind just completing that. And if I can just bring up one last slide before we go, everybody. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes, Karen.
The AGM one. So we've got our AGM on the 14th of May. We'd love to see you all there. It's starting at 9:45 and finishing at 2:30. We've got a lot of exciting stuff going on the day, so please come along. It's at the Motorcycle Museum in Solihull. So if you've got nothing to do on that day and you'd like to join us for some fun and look at some lovely things, and we're going to have some local suppliers there as well, please come and join us. We'd love to see you there. So that's all I need to say. If I can just ask Nikki and Greg to hold on afterwards, if that's okay at the end, that'd be brilliant. Yeah. Thank you ever so much, brilliant. Everybody.
Okay, good to see you all.
Okay, thanks then. Bye for now.
Thanks, Chaz. Thanks, Bernadette. Bye.